It happened on a Tuesday afternoon to someone who had done nothing wrong. No malware, no hacking, no careless click on a suspicious email. Just a routine Windows update, a single default setting that had been quietly active for months without anyone knowing it was there, and then a progress bar that appeared on the screen with a message so casual, so matter of fact, that the person reading it didn't fully understand what it meant until the bar finished moving and the computer restarted. By the time they understood what had happened, every photograph from the past 6 years was gone. Every document, every project file, every download. The drive wasn't corrupted. It wasn't failing. It had been wiped completely, deliberately, and by the operating system itself, because a default setting nobody had ever explained to them had decided the drive needed to be cleaned. This is not a hypothetical. This is a pattern that is played out on real computers owned by real people, and the reason it keeps happening is because Windows has a set of default behaviors around storage, resets, and automatic maintenance that are genuinely dangerous when you don't know they exist. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what those settings are, where they live, and how to make sure your data is never quietly erased by the operating system you trusted to protect it. Let's start with the one that has caused the most documented data loss, and it is hiding in a place that most people would never think to look. It's called Storage Sense, and on the surface, it sounds completely reasonable, even helpful. Storage Sense is a Windows feature designed to automatically free up disk space by deleting files that Windows considers unnecessary. Temporary files, old Windows Update downloads, files that have been sitting in your recycle bin for a while, and here is where it becomes genuinely dangerous, files in your downloads folder that haven't been opened in a certain number of days. By default on many Windows 11 installations, Storage Sense is configured to automatically delete files from your downloads folder after 30 days if those files haven't been opened. 30 days. If you downloaded something, saved it to your downloads folder, and didn't open it again within a month, Storage Sense may have quietly deleted it without a single notification, without a confirmation dialog, without any warning that it was about to happen, or any record of what was removed. Think about what people keep in their downloads folder for longer than 30 days. Tax documents downloaded from a bank portal that you'll need at the end of the year. Software installers for programs you might need to reinstall. PDF manuals for equipment you rarely use, but absolutely need the documentation for when something goes wrong. Legal documents, medical records downloaded from a patient portal, photographs received by email and saved for later organizing, research materials, work files sent by a colleague. Any of these can be sitting in your downloads folder untouched, but absolutely irreplaceable, and Storage Sense will delete them the moment the 30-day clock runs out, silently, automatically, and without asking. Let me show you exactly where this setting is and how to check it right now. Open Windows Settings. By pressing the Windows key and I at the same time. Click on System in the left navigation panel, then click on Storage. Near the top of the Storage Settings page, you'll see Storage Sense with a toggle next to it. Check whether that toggle is on. If it is, click on Storage Sense to open its detailed settings. Inside, you'll see configuration options for how Storage Sense behaves, when it runs, what it cleans up, and critically, what it does with files in your Downloads folder. Look for the drop-down that controls Downloads folder cleanup and check what it's set to. If it says anything other than Never, your Downloads folder is being automatically purged on that schedule. Change it to Never immediately. You can still benefit from Storage Sense's other functions, clearing temporary files, emptying the recycle bin after a set period, without giving it permission to delete files from your Downloads folder that you may still need. While you're in the storage settings, also look at the option that controls how long files sit in the recycle bin before Storage Sense automatically empties it. The recycle bin is your last line of defense against accidental deletion. If you mistakenly delete a file, the recycle bin gives you a window to recover it. But Storage Sense can be configured to automatically empty the recycle bin after a set number of days, bypassing that safety net entirely. If this is set to a short interval, 14 days, 30 days, you may find that files you thought were recoverable from the recycle bin have already been permanently purged. Set this to a longer interval, or disable automatic recycle bin emptying entirely, so that you retain full control over when files are permanently deleted. Now let's talk about something that operates at a completely different scale of potential damage. This one doesn't delete individual files. It has the potential to wipe your entire operating system installation and return your computer to a factory fresh state, taking every application you've installed, every setting you've configured, and potentially every file stored on the system drive with it. It's called Reset This PC, and while it's primarily a manually triggered recovery feature, there's a specific scenario in which it can engage in ways that feel unexpected and that have catastrophic consequences for anyone who doesn't understand what's happening. Understanding this feature completely, what it does, when it can trigger, and how to protect yourself from its most destructive configurations is essential for anyone who keeps important data on their Windows computer. Reset. This PC is found in Settings under System, then Recovery. It offers two modes when you initiate it. The first is Keep My Files, which reinstalls Windows while theoretically preserving your personal files in the Users folder. The second is Remove Everything, which does exactly what it says. Wipes the entire drive and returns the system to a clean state. The Remove Everything option can be further configured to also perform a drive wipe, overwriting the drive's data with zeros or random data to make recovery impossible, which is appropriate when you're giving away or selling a computer, but absolutely catastrophic if it runs on a machine you intended to keep. The critical thing to understand is that Reset This PC is not just a menu option you have to manually trigger from within Windows. It can also be initiated from the Windows recovery environment, the pre-boot troubleshooting interface that appears when Windows fails to start correctly multiple times in a row. And the steps required to trigger a full destructive reset from that environment are not sufficiently protected against accidental activation, particularly for users who are navigating a stressful troubleshooting situation without fully understanding what each option does. The scenario that catches people is this: Windows fails to boot correctly, perhaps due to a bad update, a driver conflict, or a corrupted system file. The computer automatically enters the Windows recovery environment after a couple of failed boot attempts. The user, stressed and unfamiliar with the recovery interface, navigates through the menus looking for a fix and encounters the reset. This PC option, which is presented as a solution. They click through the options, perhaps not reading every prompt carefully, and select Remove Everything either by misunderstanding what it does or by thinking it refers only to the Windows installation rather than their personal files. The reset process begins, and within an hour, everything on that drive is gone. The protection against this scenario is not a setting you change. It is knowledge and preparation. Know that the Windows recovery environment exists, and know that it contains a reset option that can destroy your data. Know that if your computer fails to boot and lands in recovery mode, you should not click through options quickly or experimentally. Read every prompt carefully. Understand that Keep My Files and Remove Everything are fundamentally different operations with fundamentally different consequences. And most importantly, have a backup. A backup that exists on a separate physical drive or in cloud storage that is not affected by whatever happens to your primary system drive. Because no setting change protects you from data loss in a drive failure or a catastrophic reset if the only copy of your data lives on that one drive. Let's move on to another dangerous default that operates more subtly and that has destroyed data in a specific, well-documented pattern that still catches people off guard. This one involves Windows Disk Cleanup and its interaction with previous Windows installations. When you upgrade from one major version of Windows to another, say from Windows 10 to Windows 11, Windows preserves the old installation in a folder called Windows, old on your system drive. This folder contains a complete copy of your previous Windows installation, and, depending on how the upgrade was performed, may also contain copies of your personal files and settings from the previous installation. The Windows. Old folder exists as a safety net. It allows you to roll back to your previous Windows version if the new installation has problems for a period of typically 10 days after the upgrade. But here is the dangerous part. Windows Disk. Cleanup, and in some cases, Windows itself automatically, will offer to delete the Windows old folder to free up disk space. On a typical system, the Windows old folder might be anywhere from 10 to 30 gigabytes or larger. When Disk Management or Storage Sense offers to reclaim that space, many users click yes without fully understanding what they're agreeing to. In the straightforward case, where you've verified the new Windows installation is working correctly and you have current backups of all your personal files, deleting Windows old is perfectly reasonable. But in cases where a user has personal files that existed only in the old installation and were not properly migrated to the new one, or where the rollback period hasn't expired, and they might still want the option to go back, deleting Windows. Old means losing that safety net permanently. Once it's gone, it cannot be recovered through normal means. The safe practice is to verify before allowing any tool to delete Windows. Old, that all your personal files have been successfully migrated to the new installation and are accessible where you expect them to be. Check your Documents folder, your desktop, your Pictures folder, your Downloads folder. Open the applications you use most frequently and confirm your data is present and correct. Only after you've done that verification should you authorize the deletion of the Windows old folder. Now, let's address a category of dangerous default behavior that is less well known but has been responsible for some of the most complete and unrecoverable data loss events that Windows users experience: the behavior of automatic drive management features when additional drives are connected. Windows has a feature called Storage Spaces, which is a software-based storage virtualization system that can pool multiple physical drives into a single logical storage volume with options for redundancy, similar to hardware RAID systems. Storage spaces is a powerful and legitimate feature for users who understand what it does and configure it intentionally. But there have been documented cases where users who were not intentionally setting up storage spaces found their drives being incorporated into a storage pool in ways they didn't intend, with consequences for the data on those drives. More broadly, the way Windows handles newly connected drives, particularly drives that have been used in other computers or that contain data in formats Windows doesn't recognize, can sometimes present prompts that are confusing enough that a user accidentally authorizes a format or initialization operation on a drive that contains data they intended to keep. The prompt that says, "You need to format the disk in drive X before you can use it," is one of the most dangerous dialog boxes in Windows, because it appears when Windows encounters a drive with a file system it cannot read, which includes drives formatted for Linux, Mac OS, or older Windows formats. And the natural response for a user who just wants to access their drive is to click the button that says Format. Clicking that button initializes the drive and permanently destroys all data on it. If the drive contained irreplaceable files, those files are now gone, overwritten by the initialization process. The correct response to that dialog, if the drive contains data you care about, is to close it immediately and investigate why Windows cannot read the drive before taking any action. The drive may need a driver to read its file system. It may need to be connected differently. It may have a corruption issue that data recovery software can address, but formatting it destroys any possibility of recovery. Never click Format on a drive. Containing data you haven't verified is backed up elsewhere, regardless of what Windows tells you it needs to be usable. Related to this is the disk initialization prompt that Windows presents when it detects a new drive that has no partition table, or a partition table format it doesn't recognize. Windows will ask whether you want to initialize the disk using MBR or GPT partition styles. Again, for a brand new blank drive, this is the correct first step. But for a drive that was previously used and contains data, initialization overwrites the partition table and makes the data on the drive inaccessible without specialized recovery tools. The presence of this prompt when connecting a drive that contains data is a warning sign that something is wrong. Either the drive's partition table is damaged, or Windows doesn't recognize the format. The correct response is investigation, not clicking through the prompt. Let's talk about one more dangerous default that operates in a completely different domain: automatic Windows updates and their interaction with BitLocker encryption. BitLocker is Windows' built-in full disk encryption system, available on Windows 11 Pro and Enterprise editions, that encrypts the entire contents of your drive so that the data cannot be accessed without the correct authentication. BitLocker is an excellent security feature, and I strongly recommend using it, but it has one characteristic that has caused serious data access problems for users who weren't aware of it, and it intersects with Windows' automatic update behavior in a way that can lock you out of your own encrypted drive. When BitLocker detects changes to the system's boot configuration, changes to the UEFI firmware settings, changes to the boot files, or other modifications to the measured components of the system's startup process, it enters a recovery mode where it requires a BitLocker recovery key to unlock the drive and continue booting. This is a security feature. It exists to detect tampering with the system's boot environment, which could indicate an attack, but certain Windows updates, particularly major feature updates and certain BIOS or UEFI firmware updates, can trigger this recovery mode as a side effect of the legitimate changes they make to the boot environment. If you don't have your BitLocker recovery key, a 48-digit numerical key that is generated when BitLocker is first enabled and that should be saved somewhere accessible, you cannot unlock your drive and access your data. The dangerous default here is not that BitLocker enters recovery mode when the boot environment changes. That is correct behavior. The dangerous default is that Windows enables BitLocker on some devices automatically during setup or after major updates without making sufficiently clear to the user that a recovery key has been generated, where it has been saved, and what will happen if it is lost. On devices where BitLocker is automatically enabled and the recovery key is saved to a Microsoft account, users who later lose access to that Microsoft account through a forgotten password, a hacked account, or account closure, may find themselves permanently locked out of their encrypted drive. The data is technically still on the drive, but is mathematically inaccessible without the recovery key. Modern encryption, when implemented correctly, cannot be brute forced. Without the key, the data is gone as effectively as if the drive had been wiped. The protection against this is straightforward, but must be done proactively before you're in a recovery situation. Check whether BitLocker is enabled on your drive right now. Open Windows Settings, go to Privacy and Security, then Device Encryption or BitLocker Drive Encryption, depending on your Windows edition. If encryption is active, locate your recovery key and save it somewhere that is not on the encrypted drive itself. Print it on paper and store it somewhere physically secure. Save it to a USB drive that you keep separate from the computer, or store it in a password manager. If your recovery key is saved to your Microsoft account, verify that you have secure recoverable access to that account. The 48-digit recovery key is the only thing that stands between you and permanent loss of access to everything on your encrypted drive if BitLocker enters recovery mode at an inconvenient time. Treat it accordingly. Now let's talk about a category of risk that doesn't involve any single dangerous setting, but rather a dangerous assumption that Windows' default behavior encourages, the assumption that your files are being backed up when they may not be. Windows 11 has features that can look like backup solutions, but that provide significantly less protection than a genuine backup when things go wrong. File history is one example. It's a Windows feature that periodically saves copies of files in your libraries and on your desktop to a designated backup drive, allowing you to recover previous versions. It sounds like a comprehensive backup solution, and for the specific files it covers, it works. But file history does not back up your entire system. It doesn't back up application settings, installed programs, or files stored outside the designated library folders. If your system drive fails completely, file history won't help you restore Windows or your applications. Only the specific files it was configured to copy. OneDrive Sync is another feature that users sometimes treat as a backup when it is really something different. Syncing a file to OneDrive means that a copy exists in Microsoft's cloud storage, which protects against local drive failure. But syncing is not the same as backup in one critical way. Deletions sync too. If you accidentally delete a file from a OneDrive synced folder, that deletion propagates to the cloud copy as well, removing both the local file and the cloud copy simultaneously. OneDrive does maintain a version history and a recycle bin that can recover recently deleted files, but there are time limits on how long deleted files are retained, and those time limits may not be sufficient if you don't notice the accidental deletion quickly. The only genuinely reliable protection against data loss in all its forms, drive failure, accidental deletion, ransomware encryption, catastrophic system reset, fire or theft of the physical device, is a backup that follows the 3-2-1 rule. 3 copies of your important data, 2 of those copies on different types of storage media, 1 copy stored in a different physical location from the others. 3 copies means that any single failure, a drive dying, an accidental deletion, a ransomware attack, doesn't result in permanent data loss because you have other copies. 2 different media types means that a single type of media failure, say a problem affecting all hard drives of a particular model, doesn't take out all your copies simultaneously. 1 offsite copy means that a physical disaster at your location, a fire, a flood, a theft, doesn't take out all your copies at once. In practical terms for a home user, this might look like your files on your computer's internal drive, a copy on an external hard drive that you connect and update regularly, and a copy in cloud storage. Any of these can fail independently without causing permanent data loss because the other 2 copies remain intact. This is not a complicated or expensive system to set up. External hard drives capable of storing hundreds of gigabytes of data cost less than $50. Cloud storage with enough capacity for most users' important files costs a few dollars per month or is available free at smaller capacities. The investment in time and money required to implement the 3-2-1 backup rule is trivially small compared to the cost, in money, in time, in irreplaceable personal loss of losing your data to any of the scenarios we've discussed today. The dangerous default settings we've walked through today, storage sense, automatically deleting your downloads folder, the reset, this PC feature with its remove everything option that can be triggered in recovery mode, the format, and initialize prompts that can destroy data on misidentified drives, BitLocker recovery key management that can lock you out of your own encrypted drive. These are all real, documented sources of data loss on real people's computers. None of them require malware. None of them require a hacker. All of them can be triggered by a combination of default settings that nobody explained and a moment of clicking through a prompt without fully reading it. Knowledge is the first layer of protection. Knowing these features exist, knowing where their settings live, and knowing what the dangerous configurations look like gives you the ability to audit your own system and close the gaps before they close around your data. Go through the settings we discussed today. Check storage sense and disable automatic downloads folder cleanup. Understand what reset this PC does before you ever need to use it in a crisis. Know how to respond to format and initialize prompts on drives that contain data. Find your BitLocker recovery key and store it somewhere secure and accessible. And then build a genuine backup system. Not a sync, not a feature that looks like a backup, but a real 3-copy backup strategy that protects you against every failure mode simultaneously. Your data is your life's work, your memories, your financial records, your creative output. The default settings on your operating system were not written with the protection of your specific irreplaceable files as the primary priority. They were written for ease of setup and reasonable behavior across a population of hundreds of millions of users with varying needs. For your data, the default settings are not good enough. Take 15 minutes today and make them better. Because the cost of not doing it is a progress bar on a screen on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and the quiet, devastating realization of what it means when it finally reaches the end.